Chapter 11. Outstanding Talent, Kobolds. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lu Yuan flipped his right hand and retrieved the blacklight alloy sword from his battle tattoo space. The sword's body reflected a bright light under the scorching sun. After that, Lu Yuan stretched his body and cautiously got near the greystone beetle. When he arrived roughly about 20 meters from the greystone beetle, the greystone beetle's chewing motion suddenly stopped. The two antennae on its head trembled a little before it turned its body. After it saw Lu Yuan, it was startled. Lu Yuan was also startled. The senses of this little thing were a little sharp. Both parties mutually glanced at each other. After the air fell silent, the greystone beetle began to make shrieking noises that sounded like "gg." With its 8 short legs, it lunged toward Lu Yuan. The greystone beetle was the size of a small dog, almost as tall as Lu Yuan's knee. However, its mouthpart was extremely menacing and somewhat frightening to look at. After all, this was a bug. In his previous life, Lu Yuan had never seen such a huge bug before on Earth. It also wasn't an aberration. However, because the current Lu Yuan had strength, he naturally wasn't nervous. When the bug charged toward Lu Yuan, it wrenched its menacing mouthpart open and tried to bite Lu Yuan's thigh. As the military fist and military swordplay that Lu Yuan practiced had evasion techniques, he only needed to take a sidestep and easily avoided the greystone beetle's bite. After that, the blacklight alloy sword in his hand chopped out, slamming into the bug's head. Caw! It felt like the blacklight alloy sword had slashed into a rock. A heavy sound echoed out as the sword body was stuck in the bug's head. This was completely different compared to the might of the bow used by that catfolk. Lu Yuan understood that this was probably the difference between genetic armaments and common weapons. However, he was poor and couldn't afford genetic armaments, so what other solutions were there? The greystone beetle's strength was extremely great. Lu Yuan had injured it with his slash, but it could still emit a sharp screeching sound as its body squirmed violently. The powerful force almost made Lu Yuan unable to hold on to his sword. When the sword was finally tugged out from the wound, the greystone beetle lunged toward Lu Yuan again in an attempt to bite him. Moreover, the distance between them was very close. Lu Yuan could even see the interior of its mouthpart clearly. He immediately jumped back quickly. Caw! The mouthpart closed in a snap before Lu Yuan's leg. Lu Yuan was so shocked that cold sweat drenched his back. What he saw regarding monsters on the forum post and the monsters he encountered, in reality, was different, alright. The strength in the tiny body of the greystone beetle was even greater than him by a little. Was this a monster from the land of origins? Luckily, he didn't enter immediately right after he awakened, or he would definitely die in a terrible manner. The wound caused the bug to be angered. Seeing that Lu Yuan had evaded its attack, it lunged over once more. The attack pattern of the greystone beetle was very simple. After observing it for a while, Lu Yuan could easily avoid its attacks. When he evaded the attacks, he would also leave behind more wounds on the bug's head. He slashed the bug a total of 5 times before his sword penetrated the thick armor on the bug's head, completely piercing its brain. The greystone beetle shrieked and fell onto the ground as its 8 short legs continued twitching. Death. Lu Yuan stared at the dead greystone beetle and heaved a sigh of relief. This type of life-and-death struggle was different from training in a martial dojo. Lu Yuan's forehead was now covered in sweat. Luckily, it was ultimately a life form with no intelligence, so the difficulty wasn't too great. At this moment, there was a flash of white light in the bug's dead body. The white light gathered before it and formed a thumb-sized white-colored crystal. Looking at this, Lu Yuan's eyes brightened as he revealed a smile. This was one of the most attractive items in the land of origins. After a monster died, its life energy would condense into a crystal known as a spirit crystal. Not only were spirit crystals easy to absorb, but they were also used as the basic currency in the transactions between different races. Their value was very important. Basically, all monsters would drop spirit crystals. The only question was the number of crystals that would drop. For weak monsters like the Greystone beetles, one spirit crystal was already considered the max number. In the past, Lu Yuan had seen some information about it in the newbie forum. For a tiny spirit crystal like this, probational gene fighters would take about 10 minutes to half an hour to absorb it. It would then grant an ordinary person a few hours or even up to a day's worth of cultivation. Lu Yuan picked the spirit crystal up. He contemplated for a while. Currently, he didn't have any other use for this spirit crystal, so he might as well choose to absorb it to check out its effects. However, he had to find a safe place first. After all, he wouldn't be able to move for at least 10 minutes, so things could be quite dangerous. He decided to handle the bug's corpse first. Lu Yuan made use of his alloy sword and cut pieces of thick greystone armor shells from the bug's corpse. These were forging materials and could be sold for money outside. After collecting the greystone armor shell pieces, the greystone beetle no longer had any value. Lu Yuan then left here. Not long later, he found a remote cave under a rocky hill. He entered the cave and only took out the spirit crystal after he sat down. Holding the spirit crystal in his hand, he began to circulate the spirit chi guiding technique according to the information he had read in the forum. A moment later, the spirit crystal transformed into wisps of spirit chi that were absorbed by Lu Yuan. They passed through the white mist and finally fused with the genetic chain. At this moment, a small segment of the genetic chain at the most bottom layer lit up once again. It was roughly equivalent to the progress he would gain if he cultivated hard for 1 hour. Lu Yuan. Lu Yuan, who had just closed his eyes, opened his eyes again as he stared with some dumbfoundedness at the crystal powder in his hand. He then fell into a daze. That's it. Just like that. Didn't they say it would need at least 10 minutes? Could it be that there's a problem with my concept of time? Lu Yuan was a little stupefied. He discovered that his situation seemed to be different from what was described in the forum post for newbies. The forum stated that a newbie needed a few days to absorb spirit chi, but he could absorb spirit chi the moment he closed his eyes. It also stated that one would need at least 10 minutes to absorb a spirit crystal, but he completely finished the absorption in just a few breaths of time. After some contemplation, Lu Yuan finally understood. That shouldn't be a mistake because back when he first absorbed spirit chi, he completed that in a short time too. There was no need for any preparation. Could the term outstanding talent be referring to me? Lu Yuan felt joy in his heart. Wait a minute, at this moment, Lu Yuan's eyes brightened as he seemed to have thought of something. Others needed 10 minutes at least to absorb a spirit crystal, so they naturally had to store the crystals first and absorb them after finding a safe location. However, he was different. He could absorb them in the span of 1 or 2 breaths. Didn't that mean that he could hunt monsters while he absorbed the spirit crystal they dropped? If this was the case, wouldn't his growth speed be much faster than others? Not only so, but the spirit chi in the crystals could also replenish the spirit chi he consumed. Right now, he didn't need to consume spirit chi, but after he recorded and engraved a gene, the genetic battle techniques he could use would surely require a large amount of spirit chi. Didn't this mean that he could replenish his spirit chi as he used them? A perpetual motion machine. For a time, Lu Yuan had a few bold thoughts in his mind. Wasn't his talent a little awesome? After that, Lu Yuan calmed his agitated heart state down and left the cave as he continued to hunt. With the combat experience from earlier, Lu Yuan now had a general understanding of his current strength. It was quite relaxing for him to deal with a greystone beetle with his current strength. He could also fight 2 of them if he pushed himself. However, he would surely have to run if he encountered 3. He continued searching for prey, planning to find isolated greystone beetles. Luckily, the greystone forest was very large and the population of greystone beetles here was immense. Hence, there were naturally a few bugs that wandered around alone. An hour plus later, Lu Yuan had found and hunted 7 greystone beetles. After defeating them, he absorbed the spirit crystals, and the amount of spirit chi he obtained was comparable to cultivating hard for a night. This cultivation speed was about 10 times quicker compared to his original speed. Also, this was merely the start. As his strength improved, the speed of him hunting the greystone beetles would become quicker and quicker. The improvement to his cultivation speed would also increase. Chi. After a few exchanges, Lu Yuan pierced the head of a lone greystone beetle with a sword. He then proficiently picked up the spirit crystal on the ground and started dissecting the greystone beetle. Just when Lu Yuan was planning to leave, he heard the sounds of footsteps echoing behind him. He turned his head and saw 2 kobolds that were wielding long blades and clad in black leather armor. They were walking toward him from outside the stone pillars. These 2 kobolds also started when they saw Lu Yuan. They quickly tightened the grab on their weapons and turned to check out the surroundings. After discovering that no one was around, the 2 kobolds exchanged a mutual glance. The smiles on their faces grew malevolent when they looked at Lu Yuan. Look at what we discovered. A lone human. Human, what do you think we should do? Lu Yuan looked at the 2 kobolds who were gradually moving closer. He frowned. In the past, he had anticipated that such a situation might occur. After all, this place was very chaotic. After a Jin fighter died, all their gains would fall out of their battle tattoo space. Lu Yuan might even encounter humans preying on other humans. Hence, Lu Yuan had tried his best to look for remote places to hunt monsters. He was very aware of his own capabilities. His current strength was still a great distance away from those seasoned Jin fighters. However, he didn't expect that despite him being careful, he would still encounter enemies. He human, obediently stand there and don't move. My blade is very swift. I won't let you suffer any pain. One of the kobolds smiled maliciously as he waved the blade in his hands. The other kobold also smiled very widely, licking his lips. I actually hope that you can resist us, so we will find this more exciting and enjoyable. Lu Yuan stared at the 2 kobolds and grinned. My friends are nearby. There are only 2 of you guys. Upon hearing this, the footsteps of the 2 kobolds paused as they suspiciously glanced at the surroundings. Your friends. One of the kobolds didn't realize what was going on. As he spoke, he discovered that Lu Yuan had run tens of meters away. A moment later, he roared in rage, damnable humans, he actually dares to trick me. Chase and kill him. Lu Yuan grinned as he turned back to glance at the 2 kobolds. This little lord has remembered you guys, just wait for my revenge. Actually. Lu Yuan felt very unbearable. When he saw the equipment on the kobolds, he instantly knew he wouldn't be able to win against them. Since he couldn't defeat them, he could only run. To think that these 2 kobolds really behaved like dogs as they kept chasing him. At this moment, Lu Yuan had a headache. Chapter 12. Strange scene. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the Greystone Forest, huge and thick stone pillars filled the area, forming a complex terrain. Lu Yuan swiftly ran through the gaps between the stone pillars. He then saw 2 greystone beetles currently enjoying a delicious meal of rocks up ahead. When Lu Yuan got near them, the 2 bugs paused at the same time. After their antennae twitched, they turned their heads and looked at Lu Yuan, who was galloping madly toward them. After discovering the culprit that interrupted their meal, the 2 greystone beetles cried out angrily and charged toward Lu Yuan. They opened their mouthparts, wanting to tear this fellow into pieces. Lu Yuan's expression remained unchanged. As his steps crossed and his body changed its posture, he passed through the encirclement of the 2 greystone beetles, continuing to run forward. Gee. The two greystone beetles seemed to have been humiliated when they looked at Lu Yuan's departing back. They emitted even angrier cries as they began to chase Lu Yuan. However, the two bugs didn't manage to chase for too long before two streams of black dot-colored blade light flashed and sent them flying. They smashed into a stone pillar and fell with their backs landing on the ground. Their 8 legs struggled as they tried their best to flip their bodies. The two kobolds had gloomy expressions when they glanced at the greystone beetles before continuing to chase Lu Yuan. When the two bugs got back onto their feet, they already couldn't find their targets when they glanced at the surroundings. Their antennae rubbed against each other before they slowly went back to chewing on rocks. Not far away, the two kobolds finally saw Lu Yuan's back view. One of them, which was a gray dot-colored kobold, laughed malevolently. "Human, don't run anymore. You won't be able to escape. Ha 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 ha. You only have a single alloy weapon on your body. This is the first time I met such a poor gene fighter. I think it's best that you obediently wait for death." The refinement degree of the two kobolds' genetic chains was slightly higher than Lu Yuan. Hence, their physiques were stronger and their speed was quicker. Although Lu Yuan had secretly run for tens of meters earlier, they were gradually catching up to him. Lu Yuan's expression was somewhat unsightly. Could it be that he really had to die here? This was the first time he entered the land of origins. If he exited via death, all his hard work earlier would be wasted. And after he died, his mind would suffer from injuries. If he wanted to enter again, he would have to wait for his injuries to recover. How much time would he have to waste? This was something he couldn't accept. Lu Yuan glanced at the surroundings while he pondered for a solution. At this moment, 3 more greystone beetles appeared in the distance. When they sensed Lu Yuan's approach, they placed the rocks beside their mouths down and charged toward Lu Yuan. Che! Lu Yuan clicked his tongue in annoyance. He was already being chased. Now that he still had to evade the bugs' attacks, his speed was inadvertently slowed down. Didn't that mean that he would soon be caught by his pursuers? However, his body wasn't as tough as rocks yet. If he didn't evade, wouldn't he be bitten? Lu Yuan helplessly shifted his body posture once more and evaded the attacks from the 3 bugs. Luckily, the greystone beetles only had one attack pattern. Right now, Lu Yuan could already avoid them with ease. G. The 3 greystone beetles missed their attacks and cried in rage. They then continued lunging toward Lu Yuan. At this moment, the 2 kobolds neared the 3 greystone beetles. The bugs' antennae trembled again as they turned and looked at the kobolds, shrieking and pouncing at them. Troublesome bugs. The gray-furred kobold frowned and sent a bug flying with a slash. The second greystone beetle was kicked away, and the third bug was also sent flying by the other kobold. After being obstructed by the greystone beetles, the speed of the 2 kobolds slowed down somewhat again. Lu Yuan, who wasn't far away, turned his head back when he heard the commotion. When he saw this scene, his eyes brightened as a bold assumption appeared in his mind. The speed of the greystone beetles was definitely slower than him. In addition, the bugs would attack as long as someone got near their boundary regardless of who their opponents were. If this was the case, Lu Yuan's eyes narrowed as he revealed a smile. He continued to run while bending to pick up some shattered stone fragments on the way. The 2 kobolds in the distance saw Lu Yuan's action of picking up the stone pieces, and they couldn't help but feel somewhat puzzled. What is that human doing? No idea, but this human is extremely slippery. We must not let him escape. Don't worry, he cannot escape. Look at his appearance, he should have just awakened. Since that's the case, how can he compare to both of us? Although the difference in our speeds isn't great, his endurance will surely be lower than us. When he gets tired from running, won't we be able to do whatever we want to him? Malevolent smiles appeared on the 2 kobolds' faces. However, when they saw Lu Yuan's next action, their eyes opened wide. Some of the gaps between the stone pillars in the Greystone forest were about 30 to 40 meters wide. Usually speaking, greystone beetles would only consume food at the surface of the stone pillars. Though everyone had no idea why their appetites were so good and why they wouldn't be tired of eating rocks. If Lu Yuan came across a larger area between the stone pillars, there was no need for him to worry about alerting the greystone beetles because he would be able to run through the gap easily. However, when Lu Yuan ran past the area where another 3 greystone beetles were gathering, he casually tossed a stone at the head of one of the bugs. The greystone beetle who was currently chewing on rocks paused its action. It silently turned its head and stared at Lu Yuan who was tossing the stone not far away. After it was silent for a few seconds, it started to shriek. The other 2 greystone beetles also turned their heads and shrieked together. The 3 greystone beetles discarded the rocks they were eating and began to chase Lu Yuan. The 2 kobolds who were not far away couldn't help but widen their eyes. What is he doing? No idea. Maybe he doesn't want to die in our hands, choosing to die in the hands of the greystone beetles instead. Stop dreaming. As the 2 of them spoke, they suddenly saw Lu Yuan tossing another stone and luring over 4 more greystone beetles at the side. Adding them to the previous 3, there were now a total of 7 greystone beetles. It was somewhat frightening to see such a scene. However, the speed of the greystone beetles was fixed. Their speeds were inferior to the 2 kobolds, so the 2 kobolds soon caught up to them. When the 2 kobolds got near the bugs, the greystone beetles turned their heads at the same time and began to charge toward the kobolds. Troublesome bugs. Even these 2 kobolds couldn't help but furrow their brows when they were targeted by 7 greystone beetles. At this moment, the eyes of the gray-furred kobold narrowed as he thought of something. Damn! I know why the human lured these greystone beetles. He wants to use the bugs to block us. The brown-furred kobold also came to a realization. After that, it howled in rage. What? That despicable human. To think that he would actually use such a method. If he was capable, he would allow us to slash and hack at him. After they frenziedly destroyed the 7 greystone beetles, a certain distance had opened up between them and Lu Yuan. The distance had reached almost 50 meters, even further compared to the distance between them right at the start. After seeing that Lu Yuan was getting further and further away, the kobold snarled in anger and started chasing after him again. Lu Yuan turned his head. He looked at the kobolds and began tossing the stones in his hands as his lips curled into a smile. The effect was pretty good. He casually tossed out stones again, throwing at the head of a greystone beetle who was enjoying its meal on a stone pillar. The greystone beetle was instantly aggroed as its meal was interrupted. It shrieked and summoned 2 more companions before they charged at Lu Yuan. At this moment, Lu Yuan was already tossing stones at the other greystone beetles he spotted. Not long later, the 2 kobolds once again closed in, narrowing the distance between them to roughly 30 meters. However, there were already over 10 greystone beetles chasing behind Lu Yuan. When the 2 kobolds saw so many greystone beetles, their expressions turned gloomy. Despicable human. Actually using such a method. The brown-furred kobold cursed. He brandished the long blade in his hand and waved it around due to his extreme anger. The gray-furred kobold had an ice-cold expression. He stared at Lu Yuan in the distance and spoke. It's fine, we can just run slower and follow him leisurely. Ah! Elder bro, are we not rushing over? If we rush over, we will draw the attacks from the greystone beetles. Since there are so many of them, we will definitely need to spend some time handling them. But by then, he will already escape. What should we do then? The gray-furred kobold coldly laughed. Doesn't he want to run? As mature hunters, we have to have enough patience. Let us wait until his strength and stamina are completely depleted before we catch him. The brown-furred kobold was enlightened. He then smiled. That's true, his endurance is definitely inferior to us. The two kobolds smiled sinisterly as they followed leisurely behind the group of greystone beetles, no longer closing in the distance. Hence, a strange scene appeared in the greystone forest. A handsome human was rushing madly forward with a group of greystone beetles following behind him. And behind the group of bugs, two kobolds with sinister smiles on their faces could also be seen. In a region of the greystone forest, a small team of 4 had just killed 4 greystone beetles. The male elf that had a beautiful appearance was clad in yellow leather armor. He then stared at the 4 spirit crystals in his hands before coughing lightly and keeping the crystals. I will temporarily keep them first. Later on, we will tabulate our spoils and split them. The other 3 consisted of a tall and skinny elf, a kobold, and a human. The human had an average appearance. At this moment, he scratched his head as he asked. Leader, how many spirit crystals do we have now? The kobold who had gray-yellowish fur laughed. I remember that we have a total of 46 crystals. Our gains aren't too bad. The tall and skinny elf opened his eyes wide. Yellow, you remembered wrongly. We have a total of 47. Is that so? Yellow's eyes were wide open. The elf leader glared at everyone. What did you all say? There are clearly only 44. Leader, why did you reduce the number? Don't tell me you wish to embezzle some. The human male glared at the leader, feeling somewhat unhappy. How can that be possible? How long have we known each other? Don't you guys know my character? How is it possible that I would embezzle our stuff? Don't tell me you guys don't trust my mathematical abilities. Back then I was the top scorer in my class. Is this real or fake? The tall and skinny elf glanced at the elf leader as he smiled. I can be the witness. We were classmates back then. All right then. The human male and yellow nodded their heads. At this moment, they heard a commotion from afar, so they turned their heads in that direction. After that, they saw Lu Yuan sprinting forward at a distance not far away from them. After seeing Lu Yuan, the elf leader widened his eyes. That human, isn't he the one we failed to failed to invite? Yellow scratched his head. Leader, you remember his appearance. In my eyes, all humans and elves look the same. You guys resemble furless monkeys. I naturally remember. It's very rare to see such a good-looking human. If it wasn't for the fact that his ears aren't pointed, would have assumed he was an elf. What is he doing here? The tall and skinny elf asked with some curiosity. The next moment, he learned the answer. A large group of greystone beetles charged out of the tunnel that Lu Yuan had exited earlier and was currently rushing in Lu Yuan's direction. Their shrieking sounds rang out incessantly. The other 4 were speechless. They exchanged a mutual glance and were somewhat dumbfounded. After that, they saw another 2 kobolds grinning as they ran after the group of bugs. Chapter 13. Elite. Grade ferocious beasts, fortune and misfortune together. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When the group of greystone beetles and 2 kobolds completely vanished from the eyes of the 4, the latter exchanged a mutual glance. There was a blank expression in all their eyes. What's their situation exactly? In the past, I heard that human saying that he had his own companions. Could his companions be the 2 kobolds? Humans would actually form companions with kobolds. That's very rare. Don't we have a kobold in our team? Why would it be rare? The elf leader didn't find it strange. The kobold named Yellow and the human male stared at each other before they grinned. From their appearances, could it be that the human has accidentally offended the bug swarm, and then the 2 kobolds are currently trying to kill the bugs to help him? Kobolds are affectionate and loyal indeed. Yellow had a look of being emotionally moved on his face. It's the same as us. The tall and skinny elf also nodded. All right, we shouldn't go and disturb them. Let's change our directions. The elf leader waved his hands and led his team toward another tunnel. Time continued flowing, and roughly over an hour later, the two kobolds were both panting heavily. When they glanced ahead, they saw that the number of greystone beetles had increased even more. There were now over 30 of them, and they all charged forward with great momentum. Anyone who saw this scene would feel as though it was a great exaggeration. After all, it was a given that Lu Yuan would encounter more bugs as he continued on his way. There was basically no chance for him to kill them, so he could naturally continue running. All of these newly encountered greystone beetles then chose to merge with the group. The gene fighters he met on the way all chose to avoid him when they saw so many bugs chasing after him. When everyone saw him leading a group of greystone beetles, everyone stared at him as though he was a demon. This was simply overly ridiculous. Was he unafraid of death? The two kobolds now felt their scalps turning numb when they saw the current number of greystone beetles. If they were surrounded, they probably wouldn't even have their bones left, right? Their gazes swept past the bug swarm and focused on Lu Yuan, who was running ahead. Lu Yuan's running speed wasn't lagging at all. In fact, they couldn't even see any signs of fatigue from him. This caused the two kobolds to have a shocked and hopeless look in their eyes. The brown-furred kobold was now so tired that his tongue was hanging outside. He panted as he spoke. "Elder brother, what's going on with that human? His speed is clearly inferior to us, but why is his endurance so strong?" The gray-furred kobold frowned and stared gloomily at Lu Yuan's back. A look of disbelief could be seen in his eyes. "This shouldn't be the case. Why is this so? Even for us, our spirit chi is almost exhausted. Logically, he should be even more tired than us, but why does it seem that he's completely fine?" The gray-furred kobold thought so much until his head almost broke, but he still couldn't figure out why. "Elder brother, what should we do now? Our spirit chi is almost fully exhausted. If this continues, things will be very dangerous for us if we run into an opponent." The gray-furred kobold also understood this. He stared at Lu Yuan's departing back as his eyes flashed. After falling silent for a long time, he gritted his teeth and spoke. "That human can count himself as lucky. We won't chase him anymore. There are so many greystone beetles chasing him. I don't believe he can survive. At that time, he will be eaten until not even his bones are left. Elder bro is correct. I feel that he definitely won't be able to live. Let's consider it as us going easy on him. Let's stop." The two kobolds halted and watched as Lu Yuan led the bug swarm away. Only until Lu Yuan and the bugs vanished did they leave in another direction. Lu Yuan would occasionally turn his head to check the situation behind him. Now when he turned, he couldn't see the kobolds anymore. He started for a moment before he felt joy. That two dogs have finally given up. Damn, they could actually persist for so long. Lu Yuan was somewhat speechless. The two kobolds actually chased him for over an hour. Over an hour. Do you know how I survived for the past hour? He seemed to have traveled through an entire small region in the Greystone Forest. He had also met plenty of gene fighters on the way. He couldn't understand what exactly made those two kobolds so persistent. Luckily, for the sake of emergencies, Lu Yuan had specially stored a spirit crystal on him. In addition to the spirit crystal he obtained when he encountered the two kobolds, he had a total of 2 spirit crystals with him. He depended on absorbing the spirit chi in the spirit crystal to fuel his body, allowing him to maintain his stamina as he continued running. And now, he had started to use his second crystal. If he finished using this crystal, he would really have no solution left. Fortunately, the two kobolds finally gave up. However, Lu Yuan turned his head and stared at the densely packed greystone beetle swarm. His lips violently trembled. Damn, earlier, he didn't think that he would be able to gather so many greystone beetles. Big brothers, are you guys not tired at all? I'm not a rock, why don't you guys just go and eat rocks? Luckily, Lu Yuan's speed was still slightly faster than the greystone beetles. Earlier, the bug swarm served as a deterrence for the two kobolds. Because Lu Yuan didn't want the situation to change due to variables and because he wanted to conserve his stamina, he intentionally ran at a slower pace. Now, as long as he put in all his effort to run, he would be able to easily shake the bugs off given some time. Hence, Lu Yuan started to increase his speed. He gradually lengthened the distance between him and the bug swarm. Although there would still be greystone beetles in front of him occasionally, Lu Yuan's speed didn't reduce much. The newly appeared greystone beetles were also gradually shaken off. Another 10 minutes passed and there was finally no more commotion behind Lu Yuan. He turned his head and looked. There were indeed no greystone beetles behind him. Lu Yuan then exhaled and leaned against a stone wall as he sat down while panting. The spirit energy in the two crystals was already fully exhausted. Right now, his body was very tired. Under the sweltering heat, his body seemed to be drenched in sweat. At this moment, Lu Yuan took out a large bottle of water and gulped a few gigantic mouthfuls as he exhaled in satisfaction. He then poured the water on his head and entire body. After that, he took out energy bars and ate them, feeling a warm sensation in his body. Only then did Lu Yuan reveal a smile. The feeling of being alive was truly great. After taking a short rest, he stood up and began to survey the surroundings. There were 4 gigantic stone pillars at his current location which branched out into 4 tunnels. There was also a small field of roughly 100 meters in radius at the center. The surrounding environment was very quiet. There were no sounds of combat. Earlier, he had spent his time running away haphazardly, so he had no idea which direction he had been running in. In any case, it didn't matter where he ran to. Surviving was the most important. Next, he finally could continue hunting at ease. Lu Yuan casually chose a tunnel and entered. Not long later, Lu Yuan encountered a lone greystone beetle. He then rushed up and swiftly killed it before collecting the greystone armor and spirit crystal. After absorbing the spirit crystal, his strength and stamina began to swiftly recover. Lu Yuan continued advancing by following the path. After he walked a certain distance, he suddenly halted as he stared ahead with large eyes. There was a cave that only had an entrance and not an exit before him. It was a dead end 100 meters ahead, but in the area near the dead end, there were 2 greystone beetles currently eating rocks. The appearances of these 2 greystone beetles were completely different from the ones Lu Yuan had met earlier. They were roughly 1 meter tall and on their back that was covered with greystone armor, there were black colored runic patterns. Black rune greystone beetles. Lu Yuan only came to his senses a moment later. These 2 bugs were the strongest among greystone beetles. They were elite grade ferocious beasts. Different from common grade beasts, the strength of elite grade beasts was several times greater than their common grade counterparts. Not only so, but they also possessed unique battle techniques and they were extremely powerful. Even for greystone beetles, one of the weakest types of beasts, their elite grade bugs were extremely strong existences. And there were actually 2 here. However, this wasn't the reason why Lu Yuan was shocked. What truly made Lu Yuan feel shocked was that behind the black rune greystone beetles, there was a wooden chest quietly sitting. The chest was about half a meter tall and looked ordinary. However, this caused Lu Yuan's heartbeat to speed up. There were all sorts of treasures that could be found in the treasure chests of the land of origins. Precious extraordinary genes, genetic armaments, special medicine with powerful effects, and even valuable knowledge, etc. All of these could be obtained from treasure chests. To any gene fighters, it could be considered a moment of great fortune if they encountered a treasure chest. This represented a gigantic harvest. Misfortune and fortune worked hand in hand. Lu Yuan didn't expect that after being chased for several hundred streets worth of distance, he actually accidentally discovered a treasure chest. This good luck, as expected of me. The question now is, what should I do about the 2 black rune greystone beetles? Lu Yuan stared at the 2 large scale bugs and felt a headache. Even for 2 ordinary greystone beetles, it would be somewhat difficult for Lu Yuan to kill them, let alone elite grade black rune greystone beetles. Just a single one was enough to dominate him. Now that there were 2, they could probably string him up and use him as a punching bag for their joint attacks. Chapter 14. 2 pieces of bad news. Experiment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lu Yuan hid in a corner and stared at the 2 black rune greystone beetles as his gaze flickered. He had no chance of victory if he fought them head-on. Hence, he could only depend on his intellect. After that, he glanced at the surrounding environment as he tried to think of a plan. Not long later, Lu Yuan stared at the dim yellowish sky. He then looked from the top of the stone wall to the surrounding environment before he narrowed his eyes slightly. A bold thought arose in his mind. He came before the stone wall and kept the blacklight alloy sword in his hand. He then used his hands and legs to climb to the top of the stone wall. Climbing a wall of stone. If Lu Yuan were an ordinary person, it would basically be impossible for him. But Lu Yuan was a Jin fighter now. His physical stats in all aspects were greatly superior to an ordinary person. His hands and legs were strong, and the performance of the muscles in his body was well coordinated. Moreover, he was extremely nimble. In just a few moments, he already scaled the stone wall that was about 30 to 40 meters tall. However, when his head was outside the stone wall, he immediately felt the whistling ferocious wind brush across his face. The ferocious wind had particles of sand mixed in it, and this caused Lu Yuan's face to feel pain. After all, his facial skin wasn't thick enough. That powerful wind force directly caused Lu Yuan's head to snap back. Due to not being prepared, his hands lost their hold on the stone wall and his body fell down. The stone wall was about 30 to 40 meters tall. Even the current Lu Yuan would surely have an incomplete corpse if he fell from such a height. At this critical moment, the blacklight alloy sword appeared in Lu Yuan's hands. He exerted force from his waist and forced his posture upright as he pierced the sword into the stone wall. The alloy sword penetrated the stone wall. After that, Lu Yuan grabbed its hilt with his right hand and finally managed to stabilize his body. Lu Yuan panted heavily as a hint of fear flashed in his eyes. Damn, I was almost frightened to death. I thought I was a goner. After he calmed down, he utilized the strength of his entire body as he climbed up again. Originally, the sandy wind in this legion was already very powerful, and it was especially powerful since he was tens of meters in the air. If he was the slightest bit careless, he might be blown away. The alloy sword in Lu Yuan's hand slammed into the top of the stone wall. He had to exert force with his feet before he could stabilize his form. Even so, Lu Yuan didn't dare to open his eyes. His face felt a stinging pain from the gusting sand. Luckily, Lu Yuan was prepared. His lips curled into a smile as a pair of protective goggles appeared in his hands. This was an item he bought after he read through the information in one of the forum posts for newbies. The environments of the initial cities in the Land of Origins were all very vile. For Storm City and Sandstone City, raging winds filled the air. So, if he appeared in one of these 2 cities, protective goggles were naturally a must-have. After all, everyone was a probational Jin fighter who just awakened. They had not reached the extent where their eyes would be uninjured even if someone poured acid in. As Lu Yuan wore the protective goggles, he exclaimed in admiration for his foresight and good preparations. As expected of me. After wearing the goggles, Lu Yuan could finally open his eyes. He then surveyed the surrounding environment. Because the wind here was too powerful, no greystone beetles could come to this place. To the greystone beetles, if there was no food, why would they come here and suffer for nothing? Lu Yuan's gaze swept past the empty landscape. Uneven dents blotted the surface, and traces of raging wind could be seen everywhere. Lu Yuan walked forward for a bit and went to the top of the U-shaped stone wall above the cave with a dead end. After he arrived at the top of the wall, he stretched his head out and peered downward. Lu Yuan could clearly see the two black rune greystone beetles below. Because the distance was too far, the two black rune greystone beetles became roughly the size of Lu Yuan's thumb. The wooden treasure chest was the same as well. Lu Yuan surveyed the two bugs from the top of the stone wall. The two black rune greystone beetles showed no signs of abnormal behavior, still chewing happily on the rocks. Evidently, even elite-grade black rune greystone beetles' perception range wasn't wide enough to reach Lu Yuan's current position. This made Lu Yuan feel reassured. If this was the case, his following plan would become much simpler. Let me see if things are the same as I've imagined. Lu Yuan's lips curled into a smile. He went toward a pillar the width of a person. After that, he stretched his hand out and grabbed the protruding part, easily breaking it off. Lu Yuan then used some strength and squeezed it, causing the rock to break down into fine grains of sand and smaller pieces. Lu Yuan furrowed his brows and whistled. Wind erosion. Under the barrage of raging winds, even tough and durable rocks couldn't withstand the power of nature. Water could penetrate a rock, let alone the raging wind. The plan in Lu Yuan's heart inched slightly more toward perfection. Let's test the reactions of those two fellows. Lu Yuan stared at the two black rune greystone beetles below and frowned. There was a hint of heaviness in his expression. At the next moment, he found a rock that hadn't eroded yet. It was roughly the size of a basketball. Lu Yuan then went to the spot above the black rune greystone beetles. He drew in a deep breath and exerted force with his right hand, throwing the rock at the ground that was roughly 200 meters away from the black rune greystone beetles. Bang! The stone landed and emitted a loud sound of impact. As a result, the two black rune greystone beetles raised their heads at the same time and stared in the direction of the sound. They exchanged a mutual glance as their antennae twitched. A few moments later, the black rune greystone beetle on the right side began to rush in the direction of the sound. The other black rune greystone beetle didn't move and remained where it was. Lu Yuan, who was on the top of the stone wall, couldn't help furrowing his brows when he saw this. There were two pieces of bad news. Firstly, a commotion of such a scale could only draw one of the black rune greystone beetles away. Despite the number of guards for the wooden treasure chest having been reduced by one, he still wouldn't be able to get close to it. The second piece of bad news was that why was the running speed of the black rune greystone beetle so fast? Lu Yuan did a comparison. Its speed was about 40% to 50% faster than the common grade greystone beetle. Given their speed, if Lu Yuan was discovered, he could only close his eyes and wait for death. Even immortals wouldn't be able to save him. Both types of greystone beetles ate rocks to grow up, so why was the difference between them so great? Lu Yuan couldn't understand this no matter how he thought. As for the second problem, Lu Yuan might have a solution to resolve it. But the first problem was somewhat hard for Lu Yuan. As he pondered, the black rune greystone beetle that ran toward the commotion had arrived at the region where the rock fell. After seeing the shattered stone on the ground, the black rune greystone beetle screeched sharply. It lifted its head and glanced at the surroundings as its antennae moved, observing the situation. A moment later, as the black rune greystone beetle didn't discover the presence of any enemies, a look of bewilderment could be seen in its eyes. It screeched a few more times and ran back to its original location. After the black rune greystone beetle returned, Lu Yuan stared at the two black rune greystone beetles who once again began eating. He contemplated and revealed a smile. Let's get started on the second experiment. This time around, Lu Yuan found two rocks the size of a basketball. He clutched the rocks with both hands and separately tossed them toward the tunnels on the left and right. Boom! Boom! Two loud sounds rang out again. The two bugs, who had just started eating, once again paused and lifted their heads as they screeched in a frenzy. They were naturally unhappy at being interrupted continuously. Their sharp claws skittered across the ground, leaving behind scars on the tough surface. Once again, the two black-rune greystone beetles matched gazes as their antennae moved. This time, the bug on the left rushed out, while the bug on the right remained behind. Not long later, the black-rune greystone beetle that rushed out arrived at the first drop point. Its behavior was the same as the previous black-rune greystone beetle. It first glanced at the surroundings. After discovering no enemies, it screeched a few times and ran to the second location for a look. After not discovering any enemies in the second place, it began to shriek loudly in a frenzy. Gee, gee, gee. As it shrieked, its claws brushed past the shattered rock on the ground as its sharp mouthpart chewed on them, causing crunching sounds to echo out. It only ran back in satisfaction after it finished eating the fragmented rock. Lu Yuan frowned and began the third experiment. This time, Lu Yuan directly tossed 3 rocks in 3 directions. Boom! 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 The heavy thudding sound rang out again. The black-rune greystone beetles who were preparing to resume their meal lifted their heads together at the first instance. This time around, the two bugs didn't communicate with each other. They screeched at the same time and began to rush in the direction of the commotions. Looking at this, Lu Yuan's eyes brightened as he revealed a smile. The first problem was resolved. As for the second problem, it was targeted at why the black-rune greystone beetle's speed was so quick. After luring the black-rune greystone beetles away, how could he open the wooden chest and escape successfully? Lu Yuan already had a plan of sorts with regard to this problem. Chapter 15. Seizing food from the mouth of a tiger, huge harvest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lu Yuan didn't toss out rocks for the 4th time. On the contrary, he decided to return and climb down via the stone wall. After that, at a distance of roughly 100 meters away from the black-rune greystone beetles, he stopped at the area with the narrowest crevices. A plastic bucket that couldn't be considered large then appeared with a flip of his right hand. He opened the bucket and poured the viscous and transparent liquid out. This was a new type of flammable oil, which was colorless and odorless. After igniting it, the flames would be able to persist for quite a long time. In addition, the temperature generated was exceedingly high. This item could produce miraculous effects in unique situations. Lu Yuan had purchased this just in case, but who would have thought that he really had the chance to use it? Lu Yuan poured the oil into the tunnel and went to and fro a few times to guarantee that the passage could be blocked completely. After that, he climbed up the stone wall again. When he reached the top, he took out a green plastic bag. The material used to make this plastic bag was a special nylon material that was sturdy, water-proof, and wear-resistant. It could be used on many occasions. This was one of the necessities listed in the forum post for newbies. Lu Yuan had bought them just in case of emergencies, a total of 20 of them. Somehow he had a use for them now. Lu Yuan opened up all the plastic bags and began to stuff many grains of sand and rocks that suffered erosion from the cold wind. Basically, he stuffed all the sand and rocks he could see into the 20 plastic bags. After the bags were filled, he divided them into 5 sets by tying 4 plastic bags together with a rope. When the preparation was done, Lu Yuan revealed a smile. His preparations were almost complete, only lacking the final step. Lu Yuan stared at his location and then went to the top of the stone wall that was nearest to the wooden treasure chest. He took out his blacklight alloy sword and exerted force to stab it deep into the stone wall, only leaving the hilt. After that, Lu Yuan took out a thick, long rope and tied it to the sword's hilt. He forcefully tugged at it, and after ascertaining that the rope had tightened, he sprayed some deodorant on his body to get rid of his body smell. After putting away the deodorant, Lu Yuan clapped his hands and narrowed his eyes. Preparations complete. Next, it will depend on whether I can turn a bicycle into a motorbike. Although Lu Yuan already had a plan, he also couldn't guarantee a success rate of 100%. However, fullness for the bold and famine for the timid, the treasure was right before his eyes. Lu Yuan wasn't a person who would ignore something like that. As long as the success rate wasn't low, he was willing to try things out. Lu Yuan then cast a glance at the two black rune greystone beetles below. Maybe it was because there was no sound of rocks falling, the two black rune greystone beetles seemed to be enjoying their meals. But very soon later, they wouldn't be happy anymore. Lu Yuan's lips curled as he revealed a smile. He went to the top of the stone wall where he had thrown rocks earlier and took out another 4 rocks that he prepared. He then began to toss them 2 by 2 in different directions. Boom! 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 The continuous sound of rocks falling caused the 2 black rune greystone beetles who were enjoying their meals to start at the same time. They then let out angry screeches. The repetitive sounds of rock falling without end made them exceptionally angry. The black rune greystone beetles immediately rushed out. Lu Yuan stood atop the stone wall and watched as the 2 black rune greystone beetles charged toward the transparent lines that were created by the flammable oil he had poured earlier, each heading in 2 different directions where the rocks hit the ground. When they arrived, Lu Yuan smiled and took out a torch. After lighting it, he hurled the torch with all his strength toward the oil. Rumble! The moment the torch came in contact with the oil, an exceedingly high temperature from the blazing fire scorched the atmosphere. The flames gushed forth and reached the top of the stone wall almost instantly. Lu Yuan could even feel the sweltering heat from his position. It caused his skin to feel some piercing pain. Moreover, as the high temperature consumed a vast amount of oxygen, he also found it somewhat difficult to breathe. However, Lu Yuan didn't stop his plan. Just like the countless times he had rehearsed in his mind, he grabbed one set of 4 plastic bags and threw them to the top of the wall of flames. Rumble! The high temperature immediately dissolved the plastic bags. As a result, sand and stone fell out and began to be whirled along with the blistering heat and raging wind. Lu Yuan didn't stop and immediately tossed the second set of plastic bags out. After that, it was the 3rd set and the 4th set. When the 5th set was thrown out, the air was already extremely murky. In this region, a sea of flames could be seen. A small portion of sand and stone began to melt as they landed on the ground, while the majority of the sand and stone was whirling in the wind, forming an invisible barrier. The 2 black rune greystone beetles immediately discovered the unusual situation. They swiftly turned and shrieked as they rushed toward the direction they came from. However, they stopped before the wall of flames. With such heat, although they were elite-grade ferocious beasts, they would still be injured if they charged past it. Upon sensing danger, they hesitated for a while. At this moment, a portion of the melted sand and stone landed on the backs of the black rune greystone beetles, causing them to screech in pain. Green smoke began to emit from their shells. This frightened the 2 black rune greystone beetles badly, and they involuntarily retreated a few steps as they shrieked frenziedly at the wall of flames. When the 2 black rune greystone beetles were hesitating, Lu Yuan had gone to the spot where he had prepared the rope earlier. He grabbed the rope with his hands and directly jumped down, his movements even quicker than special crack troops. If there was only a wall of flames, Lu Yuan's current actions would have been seen by the 2 black rune greystone beetles. But now, there was even yellow sand and melted stone flying in the air, causing the entire area to turn a murky yellow. Since their vision was blocked, the 2 black rune greystone beetles naturally didn't notice that someone had sneaked into their base and was preparing to steal their treasure. Lu Yuan's speed was extremely fast. He merely used a few breaths of time to descend the stone wall of about 40+ meters. After landing on the ground, Lu Yuan directly sprinted toward the wooden treasure chest. There was no lock on the treasure chest, so he directly opened it. After opening, Lu Yuan saw the things within. There was a white ball of light and a green ball of light. Inside the white ball, numerous strange dot-looking threads were entangling each other. As for the green ball of light, there was the shape of a black dot-colored large sword inside. Lu Yuan didn't even think about it and directly absorbed the two balls of light into his battle rune tattoo space. After that, Lu Yuan grabbed the rope and began climbing up the stone wall. The speed of his ascent was much slower compared to the speed of his descent. However, Lu Yuan still managed to reach the top in about 10 seconds. After climbing to the top of the stone wall, Lu Yuan didn't even have time to catch his breath. He immediately put the rope away and removed the blacklight alloy sword that he had embedded in the wall earlier. After that, he brought the blacklight alloy sword with him as he began to flee. Although the duration of the flammable oil would still persist for some time, because the battle tattoo space was limited, he had only brought a limited amount of that oil. In addition to the fact that sand and gravel kept falling down constantly, the wall of flames would probably dissipate soon after. When the flames were fully dissipated and the two black dot rune greystone beetles discovered his existence, he would surely become a corpse. If I don't take the chance and flee now, should I stay behind and wait for death? Now, Lu Yuan swiftly fled the scene following the stone wall, while the raging winds and flames were still strong. He only stopped after he had run for a certain distance. He collapsed on a spot at the top of the stone wall as he panted unceasingly, allowing the sand blown by the raging wind to brush past his face. Although the duration of his actions wasn't long, he was now very tired. This didn't only exhaust a lot of his stamina, his physical fatigue and tensed nerves caused him to feel even more tired. However, when Lu Yuan looked at the two balls of light in his battle tattoo space, his lips curled into a smile of wild joy. As a new gene fighter that had only awakened for a few days, stealing a treasure chest from two elite-grade ferocious beasts was a very crazy act. Even the term seizing food from the mouth of a tiger wasn't enough to describe it. But he had succeeded. Although things were very dangerous, the risk he took was very worth it. The value of the gains was simply too high. A common-grade extraordinary gene chain, an elite grade genetic armament that was a long sword that he could use. It wasn't too much to say that his gains were priceless. As expected of me. The man destined to become the pillar of support for humanity. Chapter 16. Elite, grade genetic armament, extraordinary gene. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lu Yuan didn't directly take his gains out to check. He rested a while and continued moving on the arid land, planning to find a location that could provide cover for the wind before he checked his gains. When Lu Yuan left, in another region of the Greystone Forest, there was a party of 4 gene fighters. The 4 were currently taking a break, and there were corpses of over 10 greystone beetles on the ground beside them. All of a sudden, a tall and skinny man shouted in shock. "Guys, look over there." When the other 3 heard it, they lifted their heads and looked over. In the direction where the tall and skinny guy was pointing, they could see flames towering up the sky. A moment later, everyone opened their eyes wide and revealed looks of shock and bewilderment. What's going on there? Why would there be such a huge fire? Could a treasure have appeared? Or some strange mutated ferocious beasts were just born? Why don't we go over to take a look? The tall and skinny guy turned and looked at his companions, seeking their opinions. After that, the tall and skinny guy and 2 others turned and looked at a muscular dude who wielded a greatsword. He was clad in black metal armor. "Boss, what do you think?" The muscular dude stared at the fire far away. His eyes flashed as he contemplated. After that, he narrowed his eyes and spoke. "Let's go over and take a look. However, we have to be more careful. There might not only be us in this region. This is such a huge commotion, so other lifeforms would surely have discovered the situation there too. Maybe they would also head over. We better maintain our vigilance to not get one-upped by others. When the other three heard this, all of them grinned. Boss, don't you worry. No matter what, we have been in the land of origins for a while. We naturally understand something like this. Let's go then. The muscular dude used his greatsword to push himself up as he stood. The other three also rose to their feet with excitement in their eyes. The four of them began to move in the direction of the fire. Not long later, the sand and stone fragments in the air were completely blown onto the ground. The flames also started to dissipate. As the intensity of the flames weakened, the two black-rune greystone beetles shrieked frenziedly and charged through the wall of flames. After they got past it, they ran back to the location of the wooden treasure chest. However, they soon saw that the wooden treasure chest had been opened, and the items within had disappeared. G. A moment later, the two black-rune greystone beetles emitted angry shrieks. Their claws scratched the ground unceasingly as streams of white light flashed from their bodies. After that, they rushed out and searched everywhere to see who it was that had stolen their stuff. But it was a pity that Lu Yuan had removed all his traces. Not even his scent remained. It was naturally impossible for the two black-rune greystone beetles to find Lu Yuan. And right now, the four human gene fighters gradually got close to this place. The muscular dude clad in metal armor and wielding a great sword was walking at the front vigilantly. The three other males followed behind him. When they passed a tunnel, they abruptly halted their steps. This was because three elves were walking out of a location not far away from them. Two of the elves were male and one was female. Both parties glanced at each other with wariness. But before they could speak, another three kobolds walked out of the other tunnel. These three parties of people met and stared at each other. After that, one of the male elves who was wielding a bow gently spoke. I'm sure everyone was drawn here by the light from the fire. We still have no idea what exactly is there. Why don't we form an alliance first to check the situation out before we decide what to do? How about it? After hearing this, the humans and kobolds both exchanged glances among their own parties. A black-furred kobold that was 2 meters tall laughed malevolently. Hee, I have no objections. The muscular dude from the human race coldly spoke. We are okay with it too. The three parties then split up and maintained a certain distance between them as they continued to advance. But before they could go far, they saw two dark shadows rushing out from an area ahead. After they saw clearly what the two dark shadows were, they all shouted at the same time. Black-rune greystone beetles. Damn! There are actually two. On guard. The two black-rune greystone beetles also discovered the three parties immediately. After seeing them, the two bugs' eyes turned red. You guys definitely are the thieves. Prepare to die, scums. White light flashed from their bodies as an additional layer of stone armor covered them. They then shrieked crazily as they charged the three parties. Battle technique, stone skin. The three parties. They looked at the frenzied looks of the black-rune greystone beetles and felt a little dumbfounded. Using their battle techniques the moment they saw us. Damn it, are these two black-rune greystone beetles crazy? These two black-rune greystone beetles must have gone mad. Ranged fighters, attack now. A few archers raised their bows and fired at the same time. However, when the arrows slammed into the armored shells of the black-rune greystone beetles, they merely left a white dot behind and were repelled after that. The female elf had recorded and engraved a rune. At this moment, a fireball the size of a human head appeared in her hands, and it zoomed toward one of the black-rune greystone beetles. Boom! Heatwaves ravaged the area. The black-rune greystone beetles charged out from the flame, and although its stone armor was somewhat black, its imposing aura didn't diminish. A moment later, the expressions of everyone changed. Damn! What a powerful defense! We must block them, don't allow them to rush to the back line. For a time, the entire scene was in chaos. Currently, the main culprit, a man with an extremely handsome appearance and someone that was destined to become the pillar of humanity, had found a spot on the top of the stone wall where he could avoid the wind. He was currently humming a melody as he checked his gains. He first took out that light green ball of light. There was a large sword in it. Lu Yuan exerted force as he grabbed it, and the ball of light shattered, causing the sword to fall onto the ground. The body of the sword was as black as ink. Its length was roughly 1.5 meters, and there were two areas on the sword body that seemed slightly thicker, resembling the joints of greystone bugs. Lu Yuan placed his hand on the sword hilt, and a moment later, information regarding this greatsword was transmitted into his mind. Lu Yuan wasn't surprised. This was one of the miraculous things about the Land of Origins. There would be an introduction given to the users regarding some gains they obtained. BVEC the Land of Origins was too magical. As to why it was so, no one knew the answer. In fact, no one knew if the Land of Origins merely existed in their consciousness. However, this wasn't something Lu Yuan was concerned about now. After reading the information, a smile appeared on his face. This great sword was named the Bugclaw Sword, an elite-grade genetic armament. The difference between genetic armaments and ordinary weapons was that genetic armaments were created with special materials, and users of genetic armaments could enjoy an enhancement effect. For example now. The moment Lu Yuan held the Bugclaw Sword, he could sense quite a large increase in his strength. The increase was roughly about 1-fold. This was really exaggerated. Naturally, it was because Lu Yuan's current strength was too weak and elite. Grade genetic armaments were very powerful. This was why it enabled him to gain such a huge increase in terms of power. When Lu Yuan's strength grew stronger, the amount of increment would become smaller and smaller. But right now, this Bugclaw Sword was like a divine weapon to Lu Yuan. Not only so, but when Lu Yuan pierced the tip of the Bugclaw Sword into the ground, it penetrated the rocks as easily as cutting tofu. The sharpness was much greater compared to the blacklight alloy sword that he was using. The difference between them could simply be described as one as the heaven and the other as the earth. With this weapon, what the hell was the blacklight alloy sword? It could screw off. Lu Yuan stroked the body of the Bugclaw Sword sweetly as he felt joy in his heart. With this weapon, wouldn't it be very relaxed if he wanted to kill greystone beetles? Wouldn't the speed of his cultivation become extremely fast? Lu Yuan exerted his will, and the Bugclaw Sword transformed into a ball of inky light that fused back into his body. It passed through the white mist and eventually transformed into an illusory shadow that floated in the surroundings of his genetic chain. This was another effect of genetic armaments. The enhancement effect provided by the genetic armament could exist all the time. It was fine as long as his body in the Land of Origins could withstand the effect. If the enhancement effect was too great, it might cause the body to be unable to withstand the load and eventually collapse. After all, the strength granted by genetic armaments was just external aid. For example, like now. With the enhancement effect from the Bugclaw Sword, Lu Yuan already felt that his body was extremely bloated. If there were any more enhancement effects from genetic armaments, his body probably wouldn't be able to withstand them. After he finished checking the genetic armament, it was time for the highlight of his gains next. Lu Yuan's eyes had a hint of anticipation as he took the white ball of light out. Inside the ball of light, numerous strange dot-looking threads could be seen weaving in and out. It appeared that they operated in a mysterious rhythm. Extraordinary genes were the core of all gene fighters. This was the first extraordinary gene Lu Yuan obtained. Chapter 17. Engraving and Recording Gene. Battle of Will. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Extraordinary Gene. Stone Skin. Lu Yuan obtained some information about this extraordinary gene. He raised his eyebrows. Stone skin was the greystone beetle's battle technique. It could allow one to construct a layer of stone skin on the surface of their body, greatly increasing one's defensive capabilities. Engraving and recording this extraordinary gene primarily raised one's defensive capabilities, followed by raising a certain amount of strength. To say whether or not it was powerful. It was a common-grade extraordinary gene after all, so it wasn't all that powerful. However, its defensive capabilities weren't weak. It was just that Lu Yuan felt a little disappointed. What he wanted more was an attack-type extraordinary gene. After all, he wanted to take the attack-type route, but the stone skin was more inclined toward the guard-type. Lu Yuan looked at the extraordinary gene in his hand and his gaze flickered. He looked a little hesitant. A short moment later, he made up his mind and gritted his teeth. He was going to use this. After all, given his current abilities, the difficulty of getting some other extraordinary gene was extremely high. He had no idea when would be the next time he'd get one. He should first engrave and record this one to increase his chance of surviving. In his original plan, he'd also require a guard-type extraordinary gene anyway. As long as he kept on evolving them, even a common-grade guard-type extraordinary gene could be raised to the ultimate grade. After making up his mind, Lu Yuan planned on starting to engrave and record this extraordinary gene right away. After all, the location he was at was considered quite safe. There was practically no one who'd come here. Other than that, the difficulty of engraving and recording common-grade extraordinary genes was very low. Even probational fighters would be able to do it with ease. It was unlike extraordinary genes of other grades, in which if one wasn't strong enough, engraving and recording the genes might lead to them dying from having their bodies explode. It was not like the other methods of dying. If one were to die from engraving and recording genes, even if they were in the land of origins, they'd still die in the actual world, not leaving any traces behind. Even if they didn't die from having their bodies explode, if they didn't complete the engraving and recording of the genes, they'd have some of the lifeform's characteristics, and it might be very troublesome. For example, one might grow a tail or get some strange habits. These were things that Lu Yuan had read on the posts about engraving and recording extraordinary genes. Because of it, Lu Yuan had the confidence of being able to engrave and record this extraordinary gene. He took in a deep breath, grabbed the white light ball tightly, and then clenched it hard. In the next instant, the white light ball shattered and the strange lines inside turned into flowing light, integrating into Lu Yuan's body. The strange lines passed through the white mist and entered the genetic chain. After it was awakened, the genetic chain had a chunk of empty chains. At this moment, these white lines kept on changing their forms. They then entered the empty chains and replaced them. While they were being replaced, Lu Yuan sensed that his body kept on releasing crackling sounds. His body seemed to have become sturdier and his muscles were also becoming denser. When Lu Yuan's body was undergoing changes, intense pain came gushing out. As a result, cold sweat started to break out on his forehead. F***ck. He felt like cursing. Is this what the post meant when it said that it was very easy to engrave and record common-grade extraordinary genes? This is F***king painful. The process of replacing the empty chains continued for very long. However, Lu Yuan was unable to sense the passing flow of time. After all the empty chains had been replaced, the remaining lines started to integrate with other genetic chain regions and make slight modifications to the latter. Another round of intense pain came. However, this time around, the pain was lighter than before. Having felt a little numb from the pain earlier, he even found it a little comfortable now. There might be something wrong with him. After a while, the slight modifications for the other genetic chain regions also ended. However, Lu Yuan didn't relax. There was still one final step. Screech! A crazy scream rang out in Lu Yuan's mind. Lu Yuan was shaken up. It has come. This was the last step of engraving and recording extraordinary genes. The will of the life form, to which the extraordinary gene belonged, had yet to die out completely. At the very last stage of the engraving and recording, the life form's instinctive will would make the final struggle. Only by wiping out this life forms will completely would one be able to integrate this extraordinary gene into their body. If the will of the life form got the upper hand and even managed to wipe out the gene fighter's will, then the gene fighter would undergo a terrifying mutation. In that case, death would be their best option. In a battle of will, there was only kill or be killed. To gene fighters, if they wanted to become stronger, their paths would be filled with obstacles. They'd only be able to cross the path after being covered in blood. Since the strength of the life form was related to the extraordinary gene's grade, the will of a common grade extraordinary gene naturally came from a common grade ferocious beast. It was because of this that even probational fighters would be able to easily engrave and record common grade extraordinary genes. After all, as a gene fighter, one might as well die if they couldn't even win against a common grade ferocious beast. Lu Yuan's extraordinary gene was a common grade stone skin, so it naturally corresponded to the common grade greystone beetle. The instant Lu Yuan heard the greystone beetle's familiar screech, his consciousness blurred out for a moment. When he returned to his senses, he realized that he was already within the white mist. Behind him were genetic chains that filled up the entire place. However, in front of him, white mist seethed and a 1-meter tall greystone beetle appeared. This greystone beetle's pupils were contracted, and it was screeching crazily. Its instincts told it that if it were to fail, it'd die out completely. A rabbit would bite when driven to a wall, let alone a ferocious beast. Hence, at this moment, the greystone beetle completely sank into utter craziness. Its will.body asterisk had just condensed when it went charging toward Lu Yuan's will.body. Lu Yuan was expressionless. Right now, his will.body already possessed the power from the extraordinary gene. Although the engraving and recording process hadn't been completed and the power received was discounted, he was already able to kill a common grade greystone beetle before this, let alone now. Moreover, Lu Yuan spread out his right hand. The bug claw sword's illusory shadow that was floating next to the genetic chain disappeared and then appeared in his hand. Lu Yuan's will.body became stronger again. Genetic armaments could be used by one's will.body as well. Looking at the greystone beetle that had charged up to him, Lu Yuan held onto the sword with both hands and swung it hard. A dark light flashed and the greystone beetle's will.body was slashed into two. Lu Yuan didn't stop and kept on launching consecutive slashes, completely shattering the greystone beetle's will.body. The shattered greystone beetle turned into light spots and dissipated. After that, a ball of white light integrated into the genetic chain behind Lu Yuan. At this moment, an extremely comfortable warm feeling extended out in Lu Yuan's body. This was an elevation of a life form's essence. Only after engraving and recording an extraordinary gene would someone be considered a true gene fighter. This was an elevation and transformation from a mortal to an extraordinary life form. After that, Lu Yuan's will returned to his body. He closed his eyes and sensed the elevation. A hint of a smile appeared on the corners of his lips. The engraving and recording of the extraordinary gene was completed. Clenching his hands, he could sense that his skin had become tougher. All parts of his body, including his bones, muscles, and blood vessels had undergone a tremendous change. After that, he took out his blacklight alloy sword and swiped his fingers gently on the sword. There wasn't any damage at all. He used a bit more force, but there was still no harm. It was only after he had used a lot of strength that the skin on his finger was cut and a small wound appeared. Lu Yuan looked at the small wound and felt very happy inside. Right now, his defense had become a little stronger than ordinary greystone beetles. Not only that, but Lu Yuan could also sense that his strength had received a great elevation. The raise in his attributes was about the same as having equipped the Bugclaw sword. However, the extraordinary gene was just a common grade 1, while the Bugclaw sword was an elite grade genetic armament. Although the degree of strength they increased was about the same, they had great differences. After engraving and recording an extraordinary gene, the increase in power was that of Lu Yuan himself, not from borrowing external forces through equipping genetic armaments. This wasn't all. At this moment, spirit energy seethed in Lu Yuan's body, and streams of white light flashed. A grayish-white stone skin condensed on the surface of Lu Yuan's body. Battle technique. Stone skin. He clenched both fists and hit them together. Bang! A stifled sound rang out as if two rocks smashed each other. Lu Yuan punched onto the stone pillar behind him. Bang! Spiderweb-like cracks appeared on the stone pillar, but Lu Yuan didn't feel any pain at all. Lu Yuan then slashed the blacklight alloy sword onto his arm. Keng keng keng. Only faint white marks appeared on the grayish-white skin on his arm. Lu Yuan didn't feel anything at all. This defense was too strong. Lu Yuan felt elated inside. This was a round of tremendous gains. Thank goodness he hadn't given up on that treasure chest and had gone for it. Otherwise, who knew how long it'd take for him to reach this level? Given his current capabilities, it was not difficult for him to kill greystone beetles at all. He could obtain spirit crystals easily and refine his genetic chain. The rate of his improvement would be very fast. This was not the end. The most important moment had arrived. Lu Yuan looked at the blue cube that had genetic chains around it and his lips curled up, breaking into a smile. Evolution. He was going to evolve the stone skin extraordinary gene he had just engraved and recorded. Only after the evolution would it become his final reward from this adventure. Footnote 1. Will.body. A body materialized from will. Chapter 18. Evolution, encountering kobolds. Once again you are listening at novelfull.audio. With a thought, the evolution cube that had been spinning around the genetic chain suddenly flickered with a blue glow. The blue glow reflected on the genetic chain, and the stabilized genetic chain had a tremendous change once again. This time around, the change was even more intense than when he was going through the engraving and recording process. Lu Yuan's muscles, bones, organs, and all other parts of his body seemed to be torn up and reforged. What came thereafter was intense pain. Lu Yuan's mind was blank because of the intense pain. The evolution started. Lu Yuan didn't know how much time had passed, but just as he almost found the pain that reached deep into his soul unbearable, the blue glow slowly dissipated and the pain gradually disappeared. The flickering blue light from the evolution cube started to become a lot dimmer as well, and the cube began to look a little translucent. It had stored energy to be used for evolution. There had been some previously, but most of it had been used up now. As for how it could be replenished, it was through recharging the spirit energy. As the pain gradually dissipated, a great power gushed out from the depths of Lu Yuan's body. The comfortable feeling he felt when his gene elevated earlier also appeared. The evolution was completed. However, no life forms will appeared. After all, the will of the life form from this extraordinary gene had been wiped out by Lu Yuan earlier. To Lu Yuan, this was quite a good piece of news. In the future, when engraving and recording genes, he could choose one of a grade that he was sure he could endure. He could then evolve it, and there'd be no danger at all. At the thought of this, his lips curled up into a hint of a smile. This was great. The feeling of the elevation continued for a while and then eventually dissipated. It instinctively let Lu Yuan know what the extraordinary gene after the evolution was. Black iron body. It primarily raised one's defensive abilities, strength, as well as bringing about a slight improvement to the body's agility and explosive ability. Compared to the common grade stone skin, the black iron body provided more comprehensive improvements, including agility. That wasn't all. The improvement in all areas was close to double what it was before. This was double of what he had after equipping the Bugclaw sword. This showed how much more powerful elite.grade extraordinary genes were compared to common.grade ones. Even elite.grade ones were already so powerful. Then, how horrifying would the boss.grade, leader.grade, lord.grade, and even king.grade extraordinary genes later on be? Lu Yuan was filled with anticipation just at the thought of it. It was a pity that the evolution cube's energy couldn't evolve the extraordinary gene he had right now. Moreover, even if he wished to evolve it, his body's strength wouldn't be able to increase any further. He wouldn't be able to take it. If he wished to have another evolution, he probably had to refine his genetic chain further first. However, he was plenty strong now. He had an elite.grade gene and a genetic armament. Given that he was in a newbie area like the Greystone Forest, he could have his way in things. Lu Yuan felt that he'd be fine even if he were to take on a black.rune greystone beetle now. Speaking of black.rune greystone beetles, Lu Yuan thought of the two from previously. He wondered what happened to them. Should he go and greet them? Lu Yuan thought about it and felt that it could be done. Therefore, he left his hiding spot and headed to the route he came from. In the past, Lu Yuan would have to be very careful when walking on the top of the stone walls. However, after he had a tremendous improvement, the strong gales at the top of the stone walls were like light breezes to him. He could walk or even run here with great ease. The wind and sand, which had caused some piercing pain to Lu Yuan's skin previously, felt like gentle massaging hands when blowing on his face now. This made Lu Yuan feel a little complicated. Although I've become stronger, my skin seems to have become thicker too. Hastening his speed, he ran toward the area in front. It wasn't long before he arrived at the U-shaped stone walls area. He had just gotten close when he felt a remnant warmth. This was the high temperature that was left behind after the firewall from earlier had been extinguished. Lu Yuan took a look at the bottom and then was stunned. It was because the two black.rune greystone beetles were already dead. Their corpses had been dealt with as well, their precious stone armor shells taken away. They had clearly met their match. He had wanted to deal with the two black.rune greystone beetles himself but didn't expect that someone else had beat him to it. It was probably some gene fighters that had been lured over by the fire earlier. Lu Yuan heaved a slight sense of relief, feeling a little thankful. Thankfully, he ran fast enough earlier. Gene fighters and black.rune greystone beetles were different. Their intelligence was higher. Given gene fighters' intelligence, they should be able to notice that there was a problem with the stone wall. If Lu Yuan had stayed here, he might have been discovered. Since the black.rune greystone beetles had died, Lu Yuan naturally didn't plan on staying here for long. After climbing down the stone wall, he passed by the black.rune greystone beetles' corpses and took additional looks at them. He then randomly found a passageway to leave. It wasn't long before Lu Yuan encountered two greystone beetles munching on rocks under a stone pillar. His eyes gleamed. He wanted to test out his current capabilities. The Bugclaw sword appeared in Lu Yuan's hand, and he walked toward the two greystone beetles. When Lu Yuan was about 20 meters away from them, they paused and turned to look toward him. Thereafter, they screeched and dashed toward Lu Yuan. Lu Yuan looked at their savage mouths and wasn't as nervous as he was when he first encountered greystone beetles. When the greystone beetles got close, he swung his long sword and pitch-black sword light brushed past them. They suddenly stopped in their charging motion. When their bodies passed by Lu Yuan, they fell down behind him. Their short legs kept on convulsing endlessly as they lost their vitalities. Death. Lu Yuan's lips curled up and he broke into a surprised smile. As expected of me. Previously, two greystone beetles could be a bit of trouble for him. He didn't expect to be able to kill two greystone beetles easily within such a short time. Lu Yuan picked up the spirit crystals and removed the stone armor shells. He then left the place and continued hunting more. 2 hours later, in an area in the Greystone Forest. Chi. Lu Yuan killed a greystone beetle that was on its own with one sword attack. After that, he let out an exhale and went up to pick up the spirit crystal. Just then, Lu Yuan heard the sound of footsteps. He paused and looked up toward the passageway where the sound of the footsteps was coming from. The sound of footsteps kept on getting closer. Thereafter, 2 kobolds wearing black leather armor and holding long blades walked out. The 2 kobolds had gray and brown fur respectively. They looked a little familiar. When the 2 kobolds saw Lu Yuan, they were stunned too. Both sides met each other's gazes and then broke into brilliant smiles at the same time. At this moment, the brown-furred kobold wore a savage expression and laughed maniacally. Ha 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 ha. Human, you must not have expected this. We meet again. Let's see how you're going to run this time around. Lu Yuan smiled as well. I was wondering if I could see you guys again. I didn't expect my luck to be quite good. Meeting us is lucky. It seems that the genetic armament you obtained gives you confidence, huh? Your confidence is worthless. The gray-furred kobold took a glance at the bug-claw sword in Lu Yuan's hand and let out a smirk. He held on to his long blade and got closer to Lu Yuan. The brown-furred kobold followed after him. Do you not know that both of us are also using genetic armaments? But we'll need to thank you for bringing us additional gains. Just as the 2 kobolds were getting closer to Lu Yuan, some people passed by the passageway not far away. They noticed this scene. They were the party of 4 with the handsome elf leader. When they saw Lu Yuan and the 2 kobolds seeming to be ready to fight each other, they were stunned. Isn't this the guy who was chased by the greystone beetles earlier? And his 2 kobold companions. The tall and skinny elf was stunned for a moment, feeling a little perplexed. What are they doing? Are they going to fight? The handsome elf took a look and said, there might have been an internal strife. His lips curled up, breaking into a hint of a smile. Let's not go over first. We'll hide and then wait for them to fight it out. Hearing the handsome elf's words, the other 3 instantly understood. We'll listen to leader. He. I didn't expect to come into unexpected gains. Not bad, not bad. Our business in scamming newbies recently hasn't been good. Such opportunities are very rare. The 4 of them hid behind stone pillars in the distance and watched Lu Yuan and the 2 kobolds. The 2 kobolds were already charging toward Lu Yuan. When the brown-furred kobold saw that Lu Yuan was standing on the spot and not moving, he smiled savagely and said, Human, it seems like you know that there's no escape for you. Are you planning to let us kill you? Don't worry, I'll be very fast. As he spoke, he charged up to Lu Yuan, raised his long blade, and then slashed down toward Lu Yuan at great speed. In the past, Lu Yuan would naturally be unable to dodge such attacks. However, after having engraved and recorded an extraordinary gene, he had improved in all aspects. That naturally included his dynamic vision. Lu Yuan raised his hand slightly. Kang. The bug-claw sword blocked the long blade easily, creating a sound of metals colliding. Lu Yuan's hand didn't budge at all. On the other hand, the brown-furred kobold felt the counteracting force in his hands, which were slightly numb now. His eyes opened big as he looked at Lu Yuan in disbelief. You stopped it. How is that possible? Why is it not possible? Lu Yuan smiled. The pupils of the other gray-furred kobold that was slightly behind the brown-haired one also contracted, looking a little astonished. Thereafter, he revealed a savage expression. You can block 1, but can you block 2? His speed suddenly erupted and he slashed his blade horizontally toward Lu Yuan's waist. Lu Yuan smiled and exerted force in his right hand. As a result, the brown-furred kobold felt a tremendous force coming and his body backed off unknowingly. After shaking off the brown-furred kobold, Lu Yuan turned his wrist and put up a block at a lower angle with his longsword. Kang! The bug-claw sword steadily blocked the gray-furred kobold's attack. This speed. Upon seeing Lu Yuan's movements, all of the hair on the gray-furred kobold stood up. The capabilities that Lu Yuan showed were beyond his expectations. The gray-furred kobold immediately had the thought of retreating. They weren't a match for him. Just then, Lu Yuan's longsword shook once again, pushing the gray-furred kobold one step behind. After that, black sword light flashed by the gray-furred kobold's neck. Blood gushed out and the gleam in the gray-furred kobold's eyes slowly dissipated. His corpse swayed for a little before falling to the ground. The brown-furred kobold was about to go out to help when he saw the gray-furred kobold falling to the ground. He then stopped on the spot. Elder brother. He glared at Lu Yuan, his eyes filled with astonishment. How is that possible? You were still being pursued by us earlier. It's only been such a short time since then. How did you become so much stronger? Lu Yuan looked at the brown-furred kobold, whose hair was all standing up. He broke into an amicable smile and got close. Why don't you make a guess? Chapter 19. Shadow in the Darkness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Don't come over. The brown-furred kobold had a hint of horror in his eyes, and he turned to run away. However, he didn't run for long because Lu Yuan directly caught up to him and slashed at his neck, killing him. Looking at the corpse on the floor, Lu Yuan took a deep breath. This was his first time killing an intelligent life form. However, he did have experience in killing greystone beetles, so he didn't feel much discomfort. On the contrary, he felt very happy. It was the two kobolds' fault for trying to hunt him down previously. After the two kobolds died, some things slowly appeared in the air. They were some spirit crystals and gray stone armor shells, things that the two kobolds had gotten on this trip in the land of origins. If they were to leave this place due to death, they wouldn't be able to bring these things out with them. The items would drop out from their battle tattoo space. Lu Yuan found it a little regretful that the two kobolds' genetic armaments hadn't been gotten on this trip. Otherwise, Lu Yuan would get a big reward. Even the cheapest genetic armament cost several $10,000. Although Lu Yuan felt a little disappointed, he quickly collected himself together. He then picked up the spirit crystals and gray stone armor shells dropped by the two kobolds and counted them. There were 45 spirit crystals, the same as the number of gray stone armor shells. This was more than what he had gotten after hunting greystone beetles for one day. Lu Yuan put these things away. Lu Yuan was in a good mood from getting this unexpected reward. When Lu Yuan was taking stock of his gains, the elf leader and his 3 other party members who were hiding in the distance sank into silence. Gulp. The kobold, who was called Yellow, looked at the 2 corpses who were of the same race as him and couldn't help but gulp. Leader, are we going to attack? The elf leader's lips twitched and he wasn't able to hold back, slapping Yellow on the head. Attack your head. If you want to die, you can go. Yellow held onto his head and quickly shook it. No, I don't want to die. The human guy looked in Lu Yuan's direction, his eyes filled with astonishment. Is this person really a newbie? Are all newbies these days so fierce? The tall and skinny elf looked at the human guy and said. Both of you are humans, but the difference is really great. The lips of the human guy twitched and he argued, this guy must be from a big clan. Otherwise, how can he be so strong? He must have engraved and recorded an extraordinary gene, one that is very strong. It might even be an elite. Grade 1. I'm just an ordinary person. How can I compete with him? Isn't it a talent that one can engrave and record elite. Grade genes at the probational tier? Even if you were given one, you wouldn't be able to engrave and record it. The tall and skinny elf's lips twitched. And you can. Dot. The tall and skinny elf stopped talking. All right. Stop squabbling. Let's hurry up and leave. This guy is probably done putting away the stuff. If we still don't leave and get discovered, we might be in danger. Hearing the elf leader's words, the other three instantly returned to their senses and secretly left, to somewhere far away from where Lu Yuan was. After killing the two kobolds, Lu Yuan continued hunting greystone beetles while absorbing spirit crystals concurrently. After engraving and recording an extraordinary gene, the rate at which Lu Yuan was absorbing spirit crystals had become faster. He was almost able to absorb one in one breath. The spirit crystals contributed by the two kobolds were all absorbed by Lu Yuan in just a moment. This made Lu Yuan discover a problem. After he had engraved and recorded an elite grade gene, the spirit energy used to refine the genetic chain had increased by a lot. If it was in the past, his refinement progress might have reached 10% with so many spirit crystals. However, his progress was only at 3% now. This meant that if Lu Yuan wanted to refine the genetic chain to perfection, he'd need more spirit energy and the number of greystone beetles he had to hunt would be more as well. Thankfully, the difficulty to hunt greystone beetles was very low now. Moreover, given his current capabilities, he could head to other areas to hunt other ferocious beasts and obtain even more spirit crystals. This time around, he probably didn't have that much time left, so he wasn't going to run around. He was going to leave that for the next time. Just as Lu Yuan was thinking about things, he felt the abnormality in his consciousness. The door of light once again appeared amidst the white mist. Lu Yuan felt an attracting force coming from the door of light, which wanted to suck him in. Moreover, the attracting force was getting increasingly stronger. A hint of understanding flashed in Lu Yuan's eyes. The 24 hours were almost up. Lu Yuan had gotten a lot of things on this trip, so he didn't resist the attracting force. His consciousness entered the door of light and was blurred for an instant. When Lu Yuan returned to his senses, he was already back in his simple and run-down room. After that, he looked out of the window. It was dark outside and neon lights continued to flash in the far distance. Lu Yuan took out his phone and checked the time. It was 9 p.m. when he entered the land of origins, but it was 11 p.m. now. 2 hours had passed. The flow of time in the land of origins and reality was different. This was written in the posts as well. After ascertaining the time, he stopped thinking much about things. Lu Yuan then clenched his fists, sensing the seething powers in his body. The powers he had gained from engraving and recording an extraordinary gene in the land of origins also came along with him. His lips curled up, breaking into a hint of a smile. This first step wasn't bad. Although there had been some dangers, his foundation had been set up and he had fought quite well. To sum things up, he had taken flight. At this moment, Lu Yuan went to the bathroom and took a shower. He then sat cross-legged on his bed and started to use the guiding technique to cultivate. Having finished absorbing the spirit crystals, he could only cultivate the guiding technique now. To his surprise, Lu Yuan discovered that after engraving and recording a gene, the rate at which he absorbed spirit chi also became a lot faster. Of course, it couldn't compare with using spirit crystals. However, anything was better than nothing. He had nothing else to do anyway, so working hard in his cultivation wouldn't go wrong. Time flowed and it was past midnight now. It had become a lot darker outside. In a corner of Lu Yuan's room, a black shadow slowly appeared. It was a strange and twisted shadow. After this shadow appeared in the darkness, it slowly got closer toward Lu Yuan. Quietly, without a trace. When the shadow got close to Lu Yuan, it went along his chest and slowly extended into his body. Lu Yuan, who was cultivating, suddenly sensed a coldness throughout his entire body. He felt a disgusting feeling and his chest felt stuffy. He then shook abruptly and all the spirit energy in his body seethed crazily. His black iron body was activated. Many deep black iron rune patterns appeared on the surface of his body, extending out from his neck to both sides of his face. At this moment, 2 black iron marks manifested on his cheeks. As the black iron body circulated, his physical and defensive ability surged tremendously. As a result, the shadow screamed and was pushed out of Lu Yuan's body. Lu Yuan opened his eyes and watched as the eerie shadow twisted around and dissipated in the darkness. His pupils contracted and his scalp turned numb. What the F***ck? What the F***ck is this thing? After the final piercing screech, the shadow turned into black smoke and disappeared. Lu Yuan still didn't let down his guard. He got up and switched on the lights, assessing his room. Everything in this simple, run-down, and narrow room was normal. It was as if that eerie shadow from earlier had never appeared. What is that? Lu Yuan sat down on the bed. His brows furrowed tightly and he was still in a state of shock. If it wasn't because of the black iron body I had just obtained, I might not have been able to break free from that thing. Then wouldn't it be over for me? Hold on. Lu Yuan's body shook and he opened his eyes wide. I think I encountered that disgusting feeling and stuffy chest somewhere before. Lu Yuan tried to recall and suddenly thought of something. When he had just transmigrated, the last memory of the original body was that he had died after feeling a stuffy chest. That feeling was very similar to what he had just felt. Lu Yuan's scalp turned numb. This F***king. It couldn't have been caused by that thing, could it? Lu Yuan had found it strange as to why the original owner of this body had died a sudden death despite having quite a healthy body. Turned out that it was due to this thing. The original owner of this body was just an ordinary person. How did he get involved with such an eerie thing? Lu Yuan was a little confused. He then thought of something. Mutation incident. Could it be the mutation incident that the original owner of this body had encountered in the past? So many years had passed, but to think that the mutation incident suddenly appeared on him again. Lu Yuan furrowed his brows tightly, feeling a little nervous. Although that black shadow had turned into black smoke and dissipated, Lu Yuan felt that it had probably not died. It'd probably appear again in the future. His mood felt a little heavy. If Lu Yuan had some understanding of this thing, he could think of ways and solutions. However, the problem was that he knew nothing about that eerie black shadow. Unknown things tended to be what horrified people the most. The only consolation for Lu Yuan was that his black iron body's defense was very powerful and could fend off that black shadow's attacks. Hence, the only thing he could do was to continue to get stronger and refine his genetic chain. The stronger he could refine his genetic chain, the stronger his black iron body would become. By then, he would be safer too. Lu Yuan took in a deep breath and calmed down his heart. He then sat down on his bed cross-legged and started to cultivate again. However, this time around, Lu Yuan didn't switch off the lights. That damn thing had really frightened him, and he felt a little apprehensive about switching off the lights. It resembled the feeling he felt when he saw the black-clothed man from Detective Conan. It was a trauma. F***ck. Thankfully, he had some money and didn't care for this little bit of electricity fees. Lu Yuan finally found a bit of consolation. Chapter 20. Black Rat Gang, Conflict. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Nothing else happened for the rest of the night. When Lu Yuan opened his eyes again, it was morning. After that, Lu Yuan got up and off the bed, doing a stretch before entering the bathroom to wash up. He then walked out of his room. He planned on looking for a shop to sell the stone armor shells he had gotten yesterday for some money. When he went out, Li Qinghe hadn't gotten home yet. Lu Yuan felt that she must be working overtime. There were a few other occasions when he didn't encounter Li Qinghe in the past. Hence, Lu Yuan didn't think too much about it. People moved hurriedly in the slums in the morning. Many people wearing tattered clothes were already picking up trash by the roadside. At this moment, Lu Yuan walked to a roadside stall selling breakfast. He looked at the skinny boss and said, smiling. "Boss, please give me 2 buns. Meat buns. Give me a packet of sweet soy milk too." "Alright, please wait a moment." The boss wore a smile that was a little humble, having his back bent as he spoke. Lu Yuan smiled. "There's no hurry." When Lu Yuan was waiting, 2 ruffians with colorful dyed hair and leather armor walked over. "Boss. 5 fried dough sticks. Hurry up." Alright. The boss nodded and bowed, moving very fast. Lu Yuan took a look at the 2 ruffians. In the past, if Lu Yuan encountered such ruffians, he would try to keep out of their way whenever possible. After all, Li Qinghe had said before that these ruffians tended to have gangs backing them up. No one knew what those gangs did in the back. It could be drug trafficking or organ trafficking. Many homeless people who had disappeared in the slums were all the work of those gangs. Since Lu Yuan couldn't afford to offend them, he naturally had to hide from them. However, Lu Yuan didn't care as much anymore. After all, he was a gene fighter who had engraved and recorded an elite grade gene. There was no reason he had to intentionally avoid mere ruffians. At this moment, the ruffian who had primarily red hair suddenly said. "Yesterday's incident was King Strange." The other green-haired ruffian answered. "That's right. I heard Xiao Man say that he saw Old Blade being possessed by an evil ghost and then suddenly died." Hearing the duo's conversation, Lu Yuan suddenly paused and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. Evil ghost. Sudden death. Lu Yuan immediately thought of the shadow from last night. Could it be that other people had come across that thing too? He listened quietly. *CK it. Old Blade has sold his daughter a few days ago. It couldn't be retribution, could it? Why would there be any retribution for something trivial like this? That's true. Could it be that he has really offended some strange things? I don't know. Boss and the others are investigating this matter personally. It should be fine. Boss and the others are powerful gene fighters. I hope that boss can hurry up and complete the investigations. It's really creepy. As the 2 of them spoke, the boss of the breakfast stall had packed up the buns and soy milk. He handed them to Lu Yuan. "Here's your buns and soy milk." Lu Yuan smiled and received them. "Thank you. How much are they?" "Hold on." The green-haired ruffian suddenly shouted, squinting his eyes as he looked at Lu Yuan and the boss. "Boss, didn't you see that the 2 of us are still waiting? How dare you serve other people first? Don't you have eyes? Seems that you don't give a hoot for our Black Rat gang." "Ah. This." When the boss heard this, cold sweat broke out on his forehead and he stuttered. He wore a currying smile. "Little brothers." Bang. "Who are you to call us little brothers? Call us big brothers." The red-haired ruffian slapped down on the stall. As a result, the stall shook, and a lot of the condiments on it were knocked over, spilling onto the surface. The boss tugged his lips, continuing to wear a currying smile. "Big brothers, it's my bad. I'll waive the payment for your breakfast and prepare them for you right away." Hearing the boss's words, the 2 ruffians let out a snort and nodded in satisfaction. "At least you're tactful." The green-haired ruffian then looked at Lu Yuan who was at the side. He broke into a smile. "You look very young. Kid, is your hair fully grown? You aren't bad looking. Which club are you from? I'll patronize you next time." As he spoke, he reached out his hand to pat Lu Yuan's face. Lu Yuan didn't wear any expression on his face and grabbed the green-haired ruffian's hand. The ruffian was stunned and a hint of viciousness appeared on his face. "You've got guts." He used force, wanting to draw his hand out. However, he realized that no matter how hard he tried, Lu Yuan's hand was like a pair of metal pliers, grabbing onto his hand firmly. The green-haired ruffian kept on exerting force until his face flushed up. The red-haired ruffian noticed the green-haired ruffian's appearance and couldn't stand it anymore. "Green hair, what's wrong with you? Why are you playing around? Kid, hurry up and let go. Otherwise, I'll kill you." The green-haired ruffian was forced to suffer in silence, and he bellowed furiously at Lu Yuan with a vicious expression. Lu Yuan raised his brows and revealed a hint of a smile. He exerted a bit of force in his right hand, slowly clenching it. Crack, crack, crack. Blood-curdling sounds of breaking bones rang out. The fury on the green-haired ruffian's face immediately disappeared as he let out a sharp agonizing cry. The intense pain caused him to shake all over. His face turned pale, and sweat was pouring down profusely. He turned weak and dropped to his knees. The green-haired ruffian's agonizing cry attracted the attention of all the people nearby, so everyone looked over. When they saw the green-haired ruffian's condition, their eyes were popping out. Their faces were filled with horror. All of the adults quickly carried their children away, keeping their distance. Other people were also looking in this direction, some feeling curious, some feeling scared. The boss of the breakfast stall was frozen to the spot, looking a little stunned as he saw the green-haired ruffian kneeling on the ground. He was completely stunned. Lu Yuan let go of the ruffian's hand. The latter's arm was twisted and his bones were broken. However, there wasn't any change in Lu Yuan's countenance at all. Based on the memories of the original body, Lu Yuan didn't have a good impression of gangsters like them. Therefore, he'd naturally not hold back. The green-haired ruffian's agonizing cry gave the red-haired ruffian a scare. His eyes were wide open when he saw the green-haired ruffian's distorted arm. His eyes had turned red. "You be ******. Do you *****King want to die?" He took out a folding pocket knife and thrust it toward Lu Yuan's stomach. To him, killing seemed very normal. This thrust didn't have any hesitation at all. Lu Yuan raised his brows, reached out to grab the red-haired ruffian's hand that was grabbing on a knife, and clenched it hard. Kaka. Even louder bone-cracking sounds than before rang out. Lu Yuan exerted a bit more strength, almost crushing the red-haired ruffian's hand bones completely. The red-haired ruffian let out an agonizing cry that was worse off than what the green-haired ruffian had made earlier. His folding knife fell onto the floor, and he also dropped to his knees like his companion did. The intense pain made his raging emotions calm down. In return, a horrified expression appeared on his face, and he raised his head to look toward Lu Yuan. "Br brother, don't." Before he could finish his words, Lu Yuan slapped him in the face, causing him to fall to the ground. He glared at the red-haired ruffian. "Who are you calling brother? Call father." "Forget it. I'm scared that I'd die from your filial piety. Call me big bro." The red-haired ruffian was beaten up to the ground. He was stunned for a few seconds, and blood was even flowing out from the corners of his lips. He was in a daze for a moment, and he said with a sobbing expression, "Big bro. Big bro, don't beat me up anymore. I was wrong. I was wrong." Only then did Lu Yuan nod in satisfaction. He then turned to look toward the green-haired ruffian, who was still trembling. The green-haired ruffian held onto his twisted arm, already in tears. When he saw Lu Yuan looking over, he called out while crying. "Father.No, big bro. Big brother. I was wrong." Lu Yuan nodded in satisfaction. "Not bad, not bad. You guys are quite well behaved. Why are you still kneeling? You make it seem as if I'm bullying you guys. Get up." The two of them stood up with difficulty. Due to the intense pain, their bodies were still trembling. Lu Yuan took a look at them and turned to look toward the boss of the breakfast stall, who was stunned on the spot. He smiled and said, "Boss, you haven't told me how much my breakfast is." The boss shivered and looked as if he was going to burst into tears. He shook his head so vigorously like an electric fan. No. Little bro, no, boss, how can I ask for money from you? I must pay. How much is it? Don't worry, I'm a good guy. When Lu Yuan saw the boss looking so scared, his lips twitched and he couldn't help but explain. He just didn't like these two ruffians. It wasn't as if he was some kind of a devil. Why was this boss so scared of him? The boss kept on refusing, saying that he wasn't going to ask for money for the food. Lu Yuan tried talking a little more. But feeling like there was no way out, he scanned the QR code and paid $10. Alright, I've paid the money. Don't reject it. Otherwise, I'll beat you up. The boss looked at Lu Yuan and opened his mouth. He then eventually lowered his head, not daring to say a word. After that, Lu Yuan turned toward the two ruffians at the side. You guys knocked over the stall but aren't going to pay for things. The faces of the two ruffians turned pale. Their lips twitched and then they kept on nodding. We will compensate. Under the boss's disbelieving gaze, they scanned the QR code and paid the money. Only then did Lu Yuan smile and say, come with me. The two ruffians looked at Lu Yuan's departing back view and almost broke down in tears. They exchanged a glance and followed him unwillingly. Meanwhile, the boss of the breakfast stall stood on the spot and watched Lu Yuan's departing back view. A hint of touched feelings flashed in his eyes. After wiping the corner of his eyes, he quickly cleaned up the condiments that had been knocked over and went back to work. If he didn't work, he would have no money for rent. Without money for rent, he'd have to become homeless. In the slums, the homeless could disappear at any time and no one would care.